So, there's one, there's two, there's three, there's that, there's that. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Aaron with Aaron Fixes Stuff. About a week or two ago I made a video on how to create dumbbells and barbells at home. Because gyms are not opening anytime soon, at least in Colorado where we're at, I decided to build a workout bench that's going to have an adjustable back. So over here, I made my prototype to learn off of it, and then I'm going to make a new one today, and today's video is going to cover it. So the materials you need are going to be some sort of piece of wood for your back. In our case, I use a 3/4 inch MDF board. The reason I'm using MDF is so that I can route the edges and make it kind of smoother, and also it's cheaper and pretty durable, and it's smooth and I don't have to worry about splintering. 1 8-foot 4x4, a 2x2, and then a 1x2, and then some bolts, nuts, and other hardware. There's going to be a list of all the materials that I used, and then if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. I appreciate if you subscribe to my channel if you find this helpful. I do how-to videos, some tool reviews, and some other stuff. I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks for your time. So the first thing I did was I cut the 4x4. The first piece is a 45-inch cut that's going to serve as the back. Then I cut a 12-inch piece and another 12-inch piece that are going to serve as the legs. And finally, what was left over, I cut into half. In our case, we had 13.5 inches to create the base to add some stability to it. And here's kind of a rough idea of what this is going to end up looking like. I then created a dado joint on the base where the leg is going to go into. What I found was it was easiest to do it with my miter saw. If you have a miter saw, hopefully you can set the depth gauge on it to where you get a consistent depth. In mine, obviously you can do that, so I got a consistent depth in there. Just takes going several passes up and down. You can also do this with a circular saw. You can do it with a router or with a chisel. A chisel would take a long time, so I wouldn't recommend it. So if you have access to power tools, a miter saw, circular saw, or router would probably work the best. I found that doing it with a miter saw was easiest. I then ran it through just to smooth it out a little bit. And then here is the result. This is what it looked like. I then inserted the leg into the base. And here's a little update of what, again, it's looking like. I used a Forstner bit to countersink the bolt that's going to go through the base and into the leg. What I did next was I used a 3/8 drill bit in order to expand the hole a little bit to make it easier for the bolt to go in. And then finally I installed the bolt that's going to secure the base to the leg. So I wanted my bench to have collapsible legs because I have a smaller garage and space is a factor. So what I did is I installed a hinge on mine that allows the legs to collapse, and I found that it saves a ton of space. And here's what it looks like when the legs collapse. Next, I started working on the arms. So I took the 2x2 and cut it twice, each piece 30 inches. And after doing that, what I did is I used a nut to find the center of the 2x2 and to know how big of a hole to drill. In my case, it was a 3/8. The reason I use a 3/8 is because the bolt that I ended up using is 3/8, because I found that on the prototype that I made, I think it was a 1/4 inch. And what I found is with heavier weights at an incline, the bolt was starting to sag. And I wanted to make sure that this one was more solid and could support more weight. So I used a 3/8 bolt on this one. So I used my speed square to make sure that the 2x2s and the 4x4 are at the same height, because the bolt is going to go through the 2x2s and through the 4x4, and I wanted to make sure they were at the exact same height, because that's going to be the pivot point of the joint. And if they're not at the right height, that could create friction or cause the joint to not move properly. So I found that the best way to do it was to make sure to secure the 2x2s to the 4x4s and then drill a hole through the both of them. And then here I just went through the hole on the other side to make sure that we had the hole all the way through and that it was big enough. Alright, so next I screwed the 3/8 bolt through the 2x2 and through the 4x4. I put a washer between every piece, so between the pieces of wood, you can kind of see it on the right side. The reason I put washers in between the pieces of wood was to A, prevent friction, and B, make it move more smoothly. I next screwed the bolt through the two 2x2s and the 4x4. Made sure I had enough room, added a washer and a nut. And here you can see the nut in between the pieces of wood. I then cut the extra piece off. And then added a washer and a nut on this side as well. And the backrest later on is going to attach to these 2x2s. So still working on the 2x2, this time I drilled a 1/4 inch hole on both sides, so on both 2x2s, and this is going to be the pivot point for the swing arm, where the swing arm is going to attach to the 2x2. So here I cut the 1x2s, which are going to be the swing arms. So each one of these is 16 inches and then has a rounded top. So I just used my jigsaw to round the top off, and then I came back and smoothed it out with my random orbital sander. Once again, I used a nut to mark the size of the hole I needed to make in these. In our case, it was a 1/4 inch. And the same idea over here, I used a washer in between the two pieces of wood to prevent friction. I then repeated the process on the other side. And you can start seeing the bench is starting to take shape. Over here I drilled a 3/8 hole
1 inch from the top into either side of the 1x2. The 1x2 I used was a piece of pine because I found that it's a little bit more sturdy than just the furring strip that they sell for about $1.50 at Home Depot. The reason I upgraded this was because I knew that there would be a lot of stress on this part of it, and it is only a 1x2, and I found that upgrading that piece of wood would be worth it. I then ran the bolt through the holes, used washers and nuts to secure it on both sides. So here's an idea of how this bench is going to function. I haven't created the notches in the wood yet, which I'll do later on. So next comes the backrest and the seat for this. So I took the MDF board and I cut it in half. This was a 24 by 48 inch piece. So I cut it first into two 12-inch pieces. And then next I cut 12 inches off of the bottom of it to create the seat, and then the rest I left for the back. This step is not necessary, but if you have access to a router, I'd recommend it just because it does give rounded edges and they're going to be a little bit smoother. You don't have to worry about sharp edges. So I routed all the way around both the seat part and the back part using my router. I also made sure to route both the top and the bottom part of it, as well as all the corners. I then used my router and did the same to the backrest. I sped up this process just because it's identical to what we did with the seat portion. So just to save some time, I did it a little bit quicker. Once again, both sides, top and bottom, as well as all the corners. Alright, so my initial plan to create the grooves in the back portion of the bench, I started using my router, but I don't know if you can tell, it was not coming out straight. So I ended up just going over it again with my circular saw and my speed square, just to make sure that I had a nice edge to it. And I found that this was a lot easier to do and a lot more effective than using the router. So the notches can be put wherever you want them to be. In my case, the bottom one I put at 25.5 inches, then the one kind of next to my left hand is at 17 inches, and then I added two more, one at 7 inches from the top, and the last one at 2 inches and 3/4. And the reason I put all of these there is because that's where it felt natural to me. As far as the movement and my body type and the angles I would like it to adjust to. I then secured the MDF board to the frame. I did this while the bench was standing up because if you do it when it's lying down, when you try to pick it back up, it may not move again because of that zero clearance at the pivot point on the bottom. So I put it up, screwed it in, and then laid it down. I just used 2-inch wood screws to secure the MDF board to the frame. and I put a total of 6 screws, 3 on each side for the back piece. Here's kind of a demonstration of how it's working and why I put the notches where I put them. Next I screwed the base in. As I sat down, I noticed that the seat part didn't seem as stable as I wanted it to be, so I later came back and added two 12-inch 2x4s to add some width to the base to make it feel a little bit more stable. And I felt that that definitely made a difference and made it feel much more secure. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it to be helpful or at least entertaining if you're not going to build it at home. I do appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy it, I'd appreciate if you subscribe, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you need any help on what I did or what I didn't do, feel free to comment below and ask me what I did. I'll try to add a description with all the materials that I used on this one and what I learned from building the prototype and what mistakes I made with the prototype that made this one function better. Finally, I put a piece of 2x2 in between the front and back leg because I wanted mine to be collapsible. If you didn't want yours to be collapsible, you can just secure the leg to the top part. But in my case, I just use that 2x2 as a temporary fix. I'm going to go back and add a tension rod in between that's going to be a more permanent solution. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and have a good day.